The National Desk, America's News Now. Right now, President Biden is aboard Air Force One, making his way to Japan, leaving the U.S. with no debt ceiling deal in place as the deadline gets even closer.
We're going to come together because there's no alternative to do the right thing for the country. We have to move on.
Then expelling one of their own. Criminally charged Congressman George Santos's fate could head to the floor.
Now, Republicans in the House now have an opportunity to either stand with the American public and their constituents or to stand with someone who has been indicted on 13 counts.
And the Supreme Court weighing in on guns, the case that could leave Second Amendment supporters scratching their heads. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez. At this hour, negotiations continue, aiming to reach an agreement on raising the debt ceiling. Without a deal, the Treasury Department warns the United States could default on its debts as early as June 1st, jeopardizing the U.S. economy. Now, the negotiations happening right now are being handled by staffers selected by the President and the Speaker of the House after no deal was reached when President Biden and Speaker McCarthy met yesterday. But now, for the first time in months, both Republicans and Democrats are signaling consensus could come soon.
It was a very positive meeting yesterday. It was calm, it was candid in terms of the discussion, and I'm optimistic that common ground will be found in the next week or so.
I think at the end of the day, we do not have a debt default. I think we finally got the president to agree to negotiate.
Now, all optimism aside, time is running out fast, and sticking points remain. Answering questions this morning, the president showed his disapproval of Republicans' attempt to write work requirements into the package.
I'm not going to accept any work requirements that's going to impact on medical health needs of people. I'm not going to accept any work requirements that go much beyond what is already. Well, I voted years ago for the work requirements that exist. But it's possible there could be a few others, but not anything of any consequence.
Now, the president is making his way to Japan right now. We'll have more on that in just a moment. But he says he will be in constant contact with his negotiating team, and he's cutting that trip short, returning to the U.S. by Sunday to see a deal to the finish line. Now, as all of this unfolds, House Democrats right now are developing a backup plan should negotiations fall through this weekend. They're working on what's called a discharge petition to raise the country's borrowing limit. It's a long-shot parliamentary maneuver that would force a vote without the Speaker's approval. Now, to do that, Democrats would need the support of at least 5 Republicans. On to the president's trip now. He is currently on his way to Anchorage, Alaska. That's where he's making a brief stop before continuing to Hiroshima, Japan tonight. There he'll attend the G7 summit, where leaders are expected to largely focus on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as well as the increasing tensions in Asia. Now, to get back to the U.S. and finalize that debt ceiling deal, the president, as I mentioned, skipping originally planned stops in Papua New Guinea and Australia.
I've spoken to the Australian leader Albanese, and I'm going to be seeing him at the G7. He'll be there as well, along with the Indian Prime Minister and along with the Japanese as well. So the Quad members will be there. We'll get a chance to talk separately at the meeting.
Signaling an ease to the border crisis, the Department of Homeland Security reporting the southern border has not seen a surge in crossings as was expected following the end of Title 42. Blas Nunez Neto, the Assistant Secretary for Border and Immigration Policy at DHS, sharing some optimism earlier today.
Since the national public health emergency and our enforcement of Title 42 at the border expired on May 12th, we continue to see encouraging signs that the measures we have put in place are working.
Migrants now face harsher penalties for unlawful entry into the U.S., and the Biden administration ramped up legal pathways for people seeking asylum here. Following the policy changes, Border Patrol has seen a steady decrease in daily migrant encounters. Here's some numbers for you. Since May 12th, the daily average now roughly 4,400. That's a 56% decrease from the week leading up to that date. Still, Homeland Security officials caution it's too soon to draw any firm conclusions. Some of the border crisis focus now shifting from the border to the overwhelmed cities many asylum seekers have been bused to or are now making their way to on their own. As a result, more Democrats are joining Republicans in insisting the administration do more to find a solution. The National Desk's chief political correspondent Scott Thuman reports.
Students and parents in New York protesting their school gymnasium being used as a shelter for migrants, many of them sent to the city from Texas. Mayor Eric Adams, a staunch President Biden supporter, now also a critic.
Where the heck is the President of the United States?
That is a good question, and I think we all should be asking, why is this happening to a city that...
I don't know quite how we got to the point where you have the mayor of the largest city in the country in a kind of public spat with his brother Democrat, who's the president of the United States.
Hola. Mayor Adams was sending the overflow to other parts of the state, but that led to complaints, and a judge ended the practice. And from Denver to Washington, D.C., mayors are asking for more help, some now requesting a meeting with President Biden, who says the post-Title 42 surges didn't match many fears.
They have gone down. My hope is they'll continue to go down, but we have a lot more work to do. And we need some more help from the Congress as well.
I'm advocating don't send them to D.C. or San Francisco or even the vice president's front door. As fun as that is, you send them back to their country of origin.
Florida's Governor DeSantis, meanwhile, announcing he'll send roughly 1,000 National Guard soldiers and police officers to Texas, along with drones, boats, and planes to help control the influx. Many Democrats admitting the system is broken, but they say Republicans have to share some of that blame. They say there have been multiple opportunities to come to the table and pass comprehensive immigration reforms, and that's yet to happen, Eugene.
As we look ahead to the 2024 elections, Scott, we know the economy, of course, will be a big issue for voters, but what are you seeing about the border and the ballot box?
Eugene, if you look at some of the latest polling numbers from Reuters overall, Americans believe that there should be a candidate that they would support that would be tougher at the border when it comes to immigration laws. However, a lot of this falling along party lines, as you might suspect. 77% of Republicans say they want fewer immigrants to cross the border next year. Just 34% of Democrats say that.
Scott Thuman reporting for us in Washington. Thank you. Drug overdose deaths in the United States increased slightly last year. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, overdose deaths were up by about 2% in 2022. That's compared to two major surges seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. CDC data showing 2020 saw a 30% increase in overdose deaths. There was a 15% increase in 2021. Experts say it's too soon to tell if the plateau last year means the drug overdose epidemic is reaching a peak in the U.S. or if it will be followed by a new surge. We're watching a controversial Nebraska bill targeting both abortion and gender-affirming care advanced by lawmakers yesterday after a long and heated debate. Now, this measure, it bans gender-affirming surgeries for people under 19 and gives the state's chief medical officer authority over some other treatments. It also includes an amendment to ban abortions at 12 weeks with some exceptions. The governor of Nebraska, Jim Pillen, is expected to sign this bill, which could happen as early as tomorrow. This morning, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, chose the Cambridge Christian School in Tampa to sign new legislation that will ban state money being used for gender-affirming care for minors, further restrict pronoun use in schools, and force people to use the bathroom corresponding with the sex listed on their birth certificates. Florida Democratic State Senator.
A woman should not be in a locker room having to worry about someone from the opposite sex being in their locker room. And it's happening with athletics, with our girl athletes and women athletes.
Florida Democratic State Senator Chevron Jones blasted the governor for attacking parental rights, saying every other parent has the right to raise their child the way they want to, as long as your child is not gay, trans, bisexual. That's freedom for some parents, but not for all parents. Now, these issues of individual safety and transgender rights go well beyond that state level and made their way to Capitol Hill today. Christine Frisound reports.
She's become a leading advocate to keep transgender athletes out of women's sports and shared those views at a speech last month at San Francisco State, where Riley Gaines says she was assaulted by a violent mob and held against her will.
The mob screamed vengeful, racist, violent, awful things at both myself and the officers. They said my appearance on campus was so traumatic that they were owed something.
Gaines testified about her experience on Capitol Hill this week in a hearing focused on so-called left-wing violence, in which she shared why she got involved: to protect women's equal opportunity in sports.
It's a wire-to-wire win for Taylor Ruck.
It all started at a swim meet last year in which she tied for 5th place with transgender athlete Leah Thomas, who ultimately got the award and, she says, made her and others uncomfortable in the locker room.
A 6'4" male walks in, disrobes, and is fully intact with male genitalia while we're simultaneously undressing as 18 to 22-year-old girls, and we could do nothing about it.
The hearing was called by House Republicans, now in the majority, who appear to be laying the groundwork for issues they want to push to the top of the political priority list ahead of the 2024 campaign.
I believe it's the blue. Shows left-wing extremism. And
Democrats accusing Republicans of trying to change the subject, since the data show right-wing extremists are responsible for more incidents and killings, and also trying to provoke outrage through culture wars.
They're so fixated on trans Americans and LGBT Americans, and they're fixated on what women do with their bodies is because they do not have a plan to improve the lives of working people across the country.
The committee is adjourned.
A preview of the top issues expected to dominate the 2024 campaign already playing out on Capitol Hill. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
And we are following some breaking news here. The state of Montana, now the first state in the nation to completely ban the TikTok app. This measure is expected to be challenged in court, but will serve as a testing ground now for other efforts to ban this social media video sharing app, perhaps all across the country. Lawmakers have expressed concern that TikTok, owned by the Chinese company ByteDance, would be used to allow the Chinese government to access information on American citizens using that app. TikTok denies those claims. Still to come here on the National Desk, the latest on the push to expel Republican Congressman George Santos, a House vote on whether to involve the Ethics Committee, and the dramatic incident involving Prince Harry and his wife Meghan in New York, what they're calling a near catastrophic chase, and the mayor's response to what happened there. Then fake threats, now a major concern in schools across America. We're going to tell you the potential costs when we come back in 90 seconds. We're back now following some breaking news here. House Republicans have just defeated a motion to move towards the immediate removal of embattled New York Congressman George Santos. He was indicted, you remember, last week by the Justice Department for wire fraud, money laundering, and theft of public funds. Now, this resolution, put forth by a Democrat congressman from California, Robert Garcia, would have forced the House to vote on expulsion within the next 2 days, but that would require 2/3 of the House to agree to oust Santos. Instead, the House voted to send the resolution to the Ethics Committee, who's already investigating Santos's past activity. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle allegedly involved in a car chase in New York last night. Their office saying that they were followed along with Meghan's mother by paparazzi photographers for over 2 hours after they left a charity event. Their team described it as almost catastrophic with, quote, multiple near collisions. Well, a source from local law enforcement confirmed the couple was followed by several vehicles, resulting in numerous close calls, but no crash. New York City Mayor Eric Adams responding to the incident today.
Public safety must always be at the forefront. 2 of our officers could have been injured. I would find it hard to believe that there was a 2-hour high-speed chase, but we will find out the exact duration of it. But if it's 10 minutes, a 10-minute chase is extremely dangerous.
And the NYPD has also released a statement calling the drive after the event challenging, but did not use the word chase. In the Supreme Court earlier today, justices saying that Illinois can keep a new law banning the sale of certain semi-automatic guns in large-capacity magazines, at least for now. The court denying an emergency request from opponents of the law, asking to put that legislation on pause during a court challenge. Now, this law, which bars the sale of certain guns like the AR-15 and AK-47, was largely driven by a 4th of July shooting last year in Highland Park. The court's action comes amid a rise in mass shootings here in the United States. Calls for books to be banned are increasing all across the country. According to some new data released by the American Library Association, last year, 1,269 requests sought to remove 2,571 books. Andrew James has more on how this trend is impacting the state of North Carolina.
It happened last February in Haywood County when the parent of a Tuscola High School student questioned whether Dear Martin, a book assigned to a 10th grader, was appropriate reading material.
There's a lot of language, there's a lot of sexual innuendos, a lot of things that are concerning to me as a parent that's being presented under my child as a text.
Another Western North Carolina book controversy happened in Macon County.
This is about so much more than a very small book display.
When some community members pushed back on a pride display at a local library.
My main issue with what's going on right now is the fact that taxpayer money is going to promote so openly and directly to children the LGBT agenda.
I do not give the library permission to introduce, display, promote, or celebrate topics of sexuality of any type with my child.
These emotional, controversial, and oftentimes uncomfortable debates are becoming more of the norm.
Compared to last year, we've seen about a 38% increase since 2021. And both 2021 and 2022 represented the highest number of book challenges our Office for Intellectual Freedom has tracked in the 20-year history that our office has tracked challenges.
The job of tracking these book challenges and bans is becoming more difficult for the American Library Association. The group documented 1,269 challenges in 2022.
We know that these are targeted lists, these are targeted books, and that individuals are not necessarily providing these challenges or asking for these challenges in good faith and having read all of the books and being able to speak to why they feel every single book should not be included in the library.
Those challenges are compiled into this list, the top 13 most challenged books of the year. Genderqueer took the top spot with 151 documented challenges for LGBTQ plus content and concerns about sexually explicit material. Other books on the list include The Bluest Eye, Looking for Alaska, and The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
This top 13 list mirrors the trends that we've been seeing over the last year and a half to 2 years of targeting books that are about LGBTQ communities, as well as Black and Indigenous people of color communities and histories and stories.
In the past, she says book challenges were one-to-one, meaning one person challenged one book. That has changed, though, in recent years. In 2022, 90% of book challenges included multiple titles, and 40% of those challenges challenged 100 or more books.
That was Andrew James reporting. Today, President Biden awarded the Medal of Valor to 2 New York City police officers ambushed and killed while responding to a 911 call last year. NYPD officers Wilbert Mora and Jason Rivera were among the 9 officers honored. The rookie officer who took down Rivera and Mora's killer was also honored by the president. Biden thanked the families of the fallen.
We're incredibly proud of all of you, and I mean that. Incredibly proud of all of you. And we're going to have your back as long as we need to, as long as you're engaged.
Well, that echoes similar comments the president made earlier this week. He says officers need more resources, not fewer. Call it a sign of the times. The newest push to bring emergency medical care out of the ER to help save lives is to expand mental health crisis units across the country. Medical reporter Liz Bonus, explains why.
Hey there, everybody. When somebody calls 911 and reports a medical need, generally an ambulance arrives with trained paramedics to transport a person to the hospital. But now a newer push in many communities is to send trained mental health providers, which is why crisis mobile units are now expanding. Just as those who focus on urgent heart or stroke care bring the emergency room to those in need of immediate critical intervention, Ohio's UC Health today, one of the latest hospitals to say they will expand crisis mental health care with the same model.
Everybody wants things right now. We look at the road rage has increased dramatically. We look at the gun violence. People answer with a gun.
This team announcing they will double mobile crisis team staff, add mental health workers, expand to 24/7 operations, all to work with police and others on the scene of a mental health crisis, day or night.
We're not only able to improve upon our current services, but expand, as you've heard, the time we are able to offer it, as well as the type of person who's responding.
The National Alliance for Mental Illness, or NAMI, supports this model for crisis intervention teams, saying every person in crisis should receive a humane response that treats them with dignity and connects them to appropriate and timely care.
Expanding mobile crisis response demonstrates all of our commitment to these goals.
Those who've struggled with long-term mental health and addiction challenges say this kind of critical care that comes to you can turn lives around.
I was 14 and I struggled off and on multiple times. I had been in treatment and in different mental health facilities as well. And I had long-term recovery a couple different times, but I'll be 3 years sober in June. So
this kind of intervention can keep people out of jail and out of the hospital, giving not only more appropriate care, but it also saves health care and taxpayer dollars. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus. Now back to you.
Coming up, fake threats are a major concern on school campuses across the country. How they could impact students and taxpayers. Right after this. The National Desk's team of reporters taking the pulse of America, starting with the dangers of fake threats or swatting in schools.
It is not normal for students to see their teachers locking their classroom doors, dozens of police officers running through the hallways with guns drawn.
And when something like this happens, it is really, really difficult emotionally.
There's no way to measure those long-term emotional effects. But Don Beeler with TDR Technology tells me they can and do track data on swatting incidents. So far this school year, there's been 56 swatting or fake threats to schools made in Washington, according to his data. Those forced 57,553 students into lockdowns, and it cost those districts almost $1.3 million.
As a parent, as a taxpayer, you're paying a tutor to tutor a student in class. If someone interrupts that and you evacuate or lock down, you're no longer providing those services.
The learning lost at least partly tracked through test scores.
That there's a 5 to 7% decrease in math and English scores as a result of lost instructional time.
19 of the 27 systems tested had more than the proposed safe levels of PFAS and related forever chemicals. Earlier testing found it in source water. Now it's confirmed on the finished treated side, too.
We're not issuing any health advisories or guidance based on this initial round of really preliminary testing. But over time, as these chemicals accumulate in a water system, and as someone consumes those chemicals over time, they can lead to reproductive issues, they can lead to developmental issues, especially in vulnerable populations. And so that's why we're taking this concern very, very seriously.
The chemicals have had widespread use. DuPont started producing one of the chemicals used to make Teflon back in the 1950s in Wood County, and the chemicals showed up in water systems, and people using them had increased rates of some cancers. Forever chemicals can be treated out of the water. Lubex's added treatment provided by DuPont/Chemours after a lawsuit had no problems in recent tests. But other treatment plants, including Williamstown, Parkersburg, St. Mary's, and New Haven, did.
Hey, Grandpa!
We've had sheep get out, and usually those are pretty easy, and you know who the owners are, and you can kind of corral those back in. But a 1,000, 2,000 pound animal that's horned, I mean, it's a whole different ball game.
Luckily, Lawrence Bishop from LB Ranch in Monroe heard the police needed a little help, and he brought in the cowboys to track and wrangle the livestock. Then a lucky break on Monday night. Neighbor Don Stevens was out mowing his yard.
And about 20 feet in front of me was 3 giant steer. I mean, longhorn, you know, the
What did
big
you
longhorns.
think?
I was shocked.
2 went back into the woods, but 1 was still there when the cavalry arrived. With the help of the hounds, the heifer was driven into the driveway and then right into the garage.
Just a little bit of damage here,
Yeah,
huh?
not near as much damage as I thought there would be.